So Jesus is going to tell this story. And in the setting of the story, Luke tells us what the story is really all about. He was talking to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. So you have a pretty good idea before you even get to the parable what this is about. Right? Two men, both Jews, both pious, both fulfilling the requirements of the law, go to the temple to pray. If it were not for the fact that they're both sort of on the fringes of what Christians would have determined or would have considered to be good people, then this wouldn't be a particularly remarkable story. They go to the temple to pray. They go to fulfill a religious duty. And the Pharisee, standing off by himself, apparently rather proudly, prays. And his prayer, it's interesting. It begins, you might think appropriately enough, with thanksgiving. I thank you, O God. But what does he thank God for? He thanks God that he's better than everybody else. He thanks God that he's not like the thieves or greedy people. He's not like rogues. He's not an adulterer. Heaven knows he's not like that tax collector over there. He goes above and beyond the call of religious duty. He fasts twice a week. And he tithes his income. Now, apart from that false sense of superiority, that doesn't sound too bad, does it? Do we all tithe? Do we fast twice a week? I don't fast twice a week, obviously. Maybe I'd be better off if I did. But see, he couches his words in the guise of thanksgiving. But what he's really doing is saying to God, oh God, you're lucky I'm on your side. He's saying, how fortunate you are, God, that I am your servant. And there isn't anybody like me. It's a prayer that isn't really a prayer. It's his own self-justification. It's he's reminding himself how good he is, how superior he is, how much better he is than anybody else around. And in case, if God happens to be listening in and needs reminding, then God will know that as well. But it isn't really a prayer. It's self-congratulation, self-justification, a reinforcement, a reaffirmation of his superiority. And in contrast to that is the prayer of the tax collector. He stands off by himself as well, that he won't look up into heaven. He can't even raise his eyes from the floor. He stands there, beating his breast, a symbol of contrition and remorse, grief. Oh God, be merciful. Have mercy. Have mercy. Now the audience, who would be familiar with both of these individuals, these figures in the story, the audience might have had mixed reactions to the Pharisees. Some of them would have appreciated what the Pharisees do. Some of them probably thought of the Pharisees as smug and self-righteous and all of that. But they surely would have almost universally reviled the tax collectors. And so when Jesus tells them the twist, when Jesus puts that paradoxical ending on the story, they were probably surprised. Well, surely the Pharisee is justified by God. He's even maybe justified in praying as he prayed. He's better than most of us. But then Jesus says, I tell you that this man, the tax collector, went to his home justified. Not the other. Because everyone, all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. The Pharisee has forgotten. He's forgotten that regardless of how good a life he lives, God is the giver of that life. He's forgotten that only God can determine who is righteous and who's just. Only God can say this one is justified. He's forgotten that because he's caught up in himself. He's forgotten that he's not any better than the tax collector. In fact, he's just the same as the tax collector. He's a sinful man, the same as anyone. He's forgotten that because he has his own understanding. You see, he has his own sense of justification that he carries around with him like a coat. And he thinks he is better. He's forgotten. He's fallen through that trap door of pride. And he's caught in whatever lies below the trap door. He can't get out unless God reaches down a hand and pulls him out. He's forgotten that. But the tax collector lives in danger of falling through a trap door as well. We don't know what happens. The story ends, you see. He goes home justified. We don't know what happens after that. What if, let's just imagine for a moment, what if he goes home and doesn't live any differently than he ever had? How often is he going to be able to go back to the temple and beat his breast and moan and wail and claim God's mercy? How often is he going to be able to do that before he comes to expect God's mercy as a right? Being justified by God is the only way that it can happen. But what if he starts depending on that so that he goes on and lives his life in the same corrupt manner that he always has, making himself rich and fat off the blood, the sweat, and the toil of the poor people all around him? What if it doesn't make any difference? Does the prayer of someone who will not change have any real difference from the prayer of someone who thinks he doesn't need to change?